This video will explain section 5.3 on factoring trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. So just to review, trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c, it's called a trinomial because there are three terms. Recall that factoring is the reverse process of multiplication. So we're pulling out greatest common factors, or numbers that we would divide by. Using the FOIL method, we can show that x minus 3 times x minus 8 equals, so we would multiply FOIL, remember, is first term, x times x, x squared. O stands for outside, so our outer terms, x times negative 8 is negative 8x. Our I stands for inside. Negative 3 times x would be negative 3x. And negative 3 plus a negative 8 yields that negative 11x. And L stands for last. Negative 3 times negative 8 would equal positive 24. So these two values on the left and on the right are equal to one another. One is factored, the one on the left is factored, and the one on the right is not factored. So our trinomial results in the product of two binomials. One is x minus 3, the other binomial is x minus 8. The first term is x, and the second term is a number, including its sign. So when we're factoring trinomials, the answer will be in the form of two binomials. M and n are numbers such that when you multiply them, you get the last term, which is c. When you add them, you get the coefficient of the middle term, which is b. So let's factor. Let's keep these rules in mind. That when you multiply m times n, you get c, and when you add them, you get b. So we're thinking of two numbers that when you multiply them, you get c, but when you add them, you get the coefficient b. Okay, so find two numbers that we can multiply to equal 15, which is c, and add together to get 8. So we can make a list of factors. 1 times 15. Work your way up. 2 doesn't work. 3 times 5 equals 15. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, no other numbers are going to work. We're left with 1 times 15 or 3 times 5. And so we have to also check, can we add them together to equal 8? 1 and 15, I cannot make them add together to equal 8, even if I changed the sign to make a number negative. But 3 plus 5 does equal 8. So our numbers are 3 and 5. So if I wanted to factor this trinomial, 8x squared plus 8x plus 15, I would have x plus 3 times the quantity x plus 5. And then we can check it by using FOIL, multiplying first, outside, inside, and last. And we would end up with the same trinomial expression. So let's do another one. Find two numbers that we can multiply together to equal 20, and we can add together to equal 12. Write down possible combinations. So here are our possibilities. 1 times 20 equals 20, 2 times 10 is 20, 4 times 5 is 20. 1 plus 20 equals 21. 2 plus 10 equals 12. 4 plus 5 equals 9. We were looking for that 12, that coefficient for B. And so our answer would be the product of 2 and 10. So our binomial would be x plus 2 times x plus 10. And that would be the factored expression of our trinomial. Factor x squared plus x minus 42. Find two numbers that multiply to equal negative 42 and add together to get 1. One factor will be positive and one will be negative. So we can think of what numbers multiply to equal 42. Well, 7 times 6. But if they were both negative, then I'd be left with a positive 42. And this number is not positive, it's negative. So that means one of the factors has to be negative for our answer to be negative. So we have two options. We have either 7 is negative or 6 is negative. So we need to figure out which one would work. And let's check that. So 6 times 7, well, when we add those two numbers together, we need to end up with a positive 1. Negative 7 plus 6 would equal negative 1. So that does not work. Positive 7 plus a negative 6 equals a positive 1. So our solution is a positive 7 and a negative 6. Here are some more practice problems to go through. We're thinking of two numbers where you would multiply to equal negative 10. So we know one of them has to be negative since our answer is negative. 5 times 2 is 10. So now I just need to figure out how would I make those numbers negative, 5 and 2, so that I end up with, when I add them together, a negative 3. So that would be, our 5 has to be negative for our answer to be negative 3. 24, what numbers multiply to equal 24? 8 and 3, well 8 plus 3 would not equal 10. 12 and 2, we could get 10 with 12 and 2. So which number would have to be negative? It would have to be a negative 2 to add those together to equal 10. 12 plus negative 2 equals 10. 36, 6 times 6, but we can't add two 6's together to equal 16, so we'll try another. 18 times 2 is 36, and 18 and 2, we'd have to figure out which number is positive, which number is negative to equal a negative 16. So it has to be negative 18 plus a positive 2 equals negative 16. So here are just some facts about factoring trinomials. If the last numbers m and n will have the positive signs if the last term of the polynomial is positive. So if C is positive, then we know we're adding x plus a number, x plus a number. If they will both be negative if the coefficient of the middle term is negative. So these were all positive, so our binomials are also all positive. In this case, our C is positive, but our middle term is negative, so that means both of these numbers are negative because using our rules, two negatives, when we multiply them together, equals a positive. If we add them together, it would equal a negative. The larger of the absolute values of the two numbers will be given a plus sign if the coefficient of the middle term is positive. So we're multiplying two numbers and we end up with a negative, but our middle number is positive, so that means one of these numbers is negative. The larger of the absolute, so the one further away from 0, is going to be the positive number, because if we're adding them together, That larger one has to be positive for our answer to still be positive. If it was a greater negative, we wouldn't end up with a negative number here. And this is just the opposite. We're multiplying two numbers together. One of them has to be negative, the other one has to be positive for C to be negative. And in this case, the larger of the absolute values of the numbers will be given a negative sign if the coefficient of the middle term is negative. 7 is larger than 1, so in this case, 7 has to be negative for those two numbers to add together and still give you a negative answer. So you don't have to memorize these rules, it's just you have to look and see, well, what makes sense? What would work if I'm adding them together for me to get a negative number instead of a positive number? So let's look at factoring 2z squared minus 12z minus 32. So let's look at all the numbers. They all have a factor of 2. 2 can divide into every single one of these. So we can take that 2 out, and we're left with 2 times the quantity z minus 8 times z plus 2. Now that wasn't just a quick method here. We took out the 2, and then we have, what do we have left? We have a trinomial here with no coefficient in front of our squared term. So now we can use the method that we were practicing. What two numbers multiply to equal negative 16? Well, one of them has to be negative, so we know it's 8 times 2 is 16. Those two numbers have to add to equal negative 6. So since it's negative, 8 is the bigger number, 8 has to be, or it's further away from 0, bigger absolute value. It has to be negative for negative 8 to be added to positive 2 to equal negative 6. So now this trinomial was just factored. And we can do one more. Factoring out a 3 from every term would give us x squared plus 3x minus 54. Now with this trinomial, we can factor it out using the methods that we've been practicing. 9 times 6 equals 54, but now we have to add those two numbers together to equal positive 3, which means our number further from 0, absolute value, 9 has to be positive for this number to be positive. Positive 9 plus a negative 6 equals positive 3.